Have you ever wondered why some people train hard, go to the gym 6 times per week, eat mountains of rice, pasta, cereals, bread, and still never achieve physique they always wanted? Others eat higher amount of protein, less carbs, stay lean year-round, and look always in great shape. So who is right? For decades, bodybuilding magazines, fitness influencers, supplement manufacturers repeatedly sent the same message. You need to eat carbs in order to grow. You need to eat every 2 hours, and more carbohydrates you eat, the bigger you will become. And I was one of those who believed in that years ago. But after more than 40 years in bodybuilding, coaching thousands of clients, and studying the scientific literature, I've gradually changed my opinion. Today, I personally eat high protein, low carb, medium fat diet, and I also recommend to thousands of clients over the last 4 decades to do the same. My clients follow the same diet and they are progressing perfectly. They are all lean, and the muscle growth is simply sensational. Now, before anyone misunderstands me, let me make something very clear. I'm not saying that carbohydrates are poisonous. I'm not saying that nobody should ever eat carbohydrates. Some people, although they are a minority, can do well with relatively higher amount of carbohydrates. But for majority of people, especially naturals, and people over 40 who want to build muscle and stay lean, I recommend the diet which is built on high amount of protein and a rather lower amount of carbohydrates. And in this video, I will explain exactly why. One of the biggest mistakes I see people making is building their entire diet around carbohydrates. So usually breakfast always has to be cereals for whatever reasons, I don't know, but this is what probably 90% of world's population is doing. Then for lunch you have rice, dinner is pasta. Usually snacks have to be present because when you eat high carbohydrate diet, you will need carbs, sugar all the time. So snacks like cereal bars, fruit juices, biscuits, this is what people do most of the time. Do you think this sounds familiar? Are you one of those people who does the same? Then somewhere on the plate, next to this big amount of rice or pasta, there is a piece of chicken. And people believe that you don't need to eat much protein if you have enough carbohydrates in your diet. So this is the story that has been going on now for decades. Now, if your goal is to build muscles, you should never ask, how much carbohydrates shall I eat? The question should be, how much protein do I need? Because muscle is built from amino acids, not from starch, not from sugar, not from bread, pasta, rice, and similar carbohydrates. Your muscles are constantly undergoing a process of breakdown and repair. If you're training 4 or 5 times per week, you probably know that your muscles are constantly undergoing breakdown of muscle fibers, and that obviously requires rebuilding them. And the only building material for your muscle tissue is protein, because amino acids are literally building blocks of muscles, of muscle fibers. If you don't have enough amino acids, hence protein in your diet, your recovery process, your rebuilding process of muscle fibers will not happen. Protein is simply the structural material from which your muscles are built. Muscles are protein. Carbohydrates cannot replace protein. Fat cannot replace protein. Only protein is the one. And this is why it's called protein. It comes from the Greek word protos, which means essential, number one. Many people think that lifting weights is enough, that this is all that you need to do in order to build muscles. And obviously you should and you can eat high amount of carbohydrates, low or medium amount of protein, and that will be enough. But this is not true, because lifting weights is not building muscle, is actually breaking them down. Now, muscles grow when you are outside the gym. Muscles first of all need to recover, need to rebuild broken muscle fibers and then build them bigger. But for that, protein is again essential. So muscle growth is not caused by training, it's caused by protein intake. Now, one amino acid deserves particular attention, and this is leucine. So leucine simply acts as a biological switch. Leucine signals muscle fibers that they need to grow, and this is an extremely important role that not other amino acids are able to do. And leucine is highly present in animal protein. Plant protein have much less leucine, and not just that, plant protein also have less essential amino acids, so it's not necessarily the best protein for building muscles. But foods that provide the best protein are obviously eggs, meat, chicken, fish, dairy. So not only amino acids, but also that particular one which signals the growth of muscle fibers. Now let us address the biggest myth in bodybuilding, and this is when people say carbohydrates are anabolic. Why? Because they stimulate production of insulin. Yes, insulin is a very powerful hormone and it will signal your muscles to growth. But for production of insulin, you don't only need carbohydrates. You will also produce insulin when you eat protein. Now the question is, how much carbohydrates will be enough to stimulate the right amount of insulin that will be sufficient for signaling muscle growth? Yes, carbohydrates in certain amounts will help your body to grow, but don't forget, even when you eat protein, your insulin also increases. Not as much as with carbohydrates, but enough to still stimulate muscle growth. How do we know that? Well, from reality, from experience, from bodybuilding history. The biggest bodybuilders of all times, Golden Era legends, ate predominantly protein for months, and they were also on zero carbs. People like Arnold, Sergio Oliva, Frank Zane, Serge Nubre, and many, many others, not only in 70s, but also in 80s. How did they manage to grow? They didn't take extra insulin, and they had enough insulin to support muscle growth. So that was obviously caused by protein itself. So it's not true that if you don't eat carbohydrates, you will never produce enough insulin to stimulate that anabolic environment. This is simply a myth. Now, the problem is when people believe that carbohydrates are anabolic because they stimulate the body to produce more insulin, they usually overeat carbohydrates. There are many reasons why carbohydrates can be overeaten easily, and I will explain that in a minute. But for now, let me just remind you that lots of people overeat carbohydrates simply because they believe by increasing insulin levels in the blood via consuming too much carbohydrates through 5, 6, 7 meals a day, they will actually create that fantastic growth environment caused by insulin. Now, many people would say, but Dr. Nash, you're advising high amount of protein in order to build muscle, but why are you advising a lower amount of carbohydrates? Isn't it true that if you eat a lot of protein and a lot of carbs, you will simply create much better environment for muscle growth? But although this sounds at first glance logical, but in reality, in practice, situation is very different. So one of the biggest challenges that natural bodybuilders and also bodybuilders and other people over 40 experience is not just building muscle, is building muscle without getting excessive body fat. Now, look at people in the gym. Look at natural bodybuilders. Look at people over 40, even advanced bodybuilders who are, let's say, 30, 40, or advanced natural bodybuilders. And you will see one picture. Most of them have accumulated too much body fat. There are very few lean bodybuilders in the gym year-round. Yes, they may be lean few months before the show, let's say 2-3 months per year. But then what happens after? You see them after the show and you probably don't recognize them because they put 10, 20, 30, 40 pounds of fat, water, glycogen, whatever. They completely change. So all that hard work, all that achievement, which is actually the beauty and the story of bodybuilding, for you to look great all the time, not necessarily shredded, but you should see your veins, you should see your muscles separated, you should see your muscles. They shouldn't be always covered in fat. That is completely gone. I don't know why, but people simply stay fat. And this is more common now than ever before. The major reason for that is overconsumption of carbohydrates. So it's not necessarily carbohydrates, it's overconsumption. And we will come to that point, and I will explain to you why are carbohydrates so addictive and why it's so easy to overeat them. You have probably experienced the same thing, most of you. Carbohydrates is very difficult to control. When you start eating 100 grams of carbs per day, they quickly turn into 150, 200, 300, 400. Then you start snacking, and there are physiological reasons for that, why they become addictive. There is something called insulin roller coaster, which is caused by constant influx of carbohydrates and constant increase of glucose in your blood. Now, it's not just building muscles, gaining fat, burning fat. There are some other things which are extremely important, and I've spoke about this in few previous videos, and this is insulin sensitivity. Now, insulin sensitivity is not something which is important only now for you when you're 20 or 30, but that is something that will be even more important in the later stages of your life. So if you are clever, you will take care of those things now, not in 10 years, not in 20 years, when the damage is done. You want to keep that insulin sensitivity high. So why is that important? Because when your insulin sensitivity is high, your receptors, insulin receptors, are open, and insulin will much easier come into the cell and deliver amino acids and glucose, which are essential for growth of that muscle cell. Now, what happens when insulin sensitivity is low and you start becoming insulin resistant? Receptors of insulin on your muscle cells, they start closing down. So the muscle cells start receiving less and less amino acids and glucose. So they start shrinking. But what happens then? Because your body requires amino acids and glucose in the muscle cells, it starts producing insulin even in much higher amounts. So now you are overproducing insulin. And more insulin you produce, more insulin resistant you become. Higher insulin level in your body will definitely bring most of the glucose into fat cells, because muscle cells have closed insulin receptors. But fat cells will be very open and they will be welcoming. So the glucose taken out from the bloodstream into the fat cells will be converted into triglycerides. So this is the problem with insulin sensitivity. Now, when you eat carbohydrates 5-6 times a day, you will lower that insulin sensitivity. And you will try everything you can, but it's going to be very difficult to get in shape, to lose body fat, as long as your insulin sensitivity is low. And I have seen this cycle countless times in the gyms. I've seen bodybuilders bulking in the off-season, getting fat, bigger, but muscles are not growing because of obviously low insulin sensitivity. Then they start getting ready for the show. Some of them never compete. They're always fat for forever, for decades. I know a lot of people who are regular in the gym, but they are overweight. A lot of people. Now, some who compete, they will start dieting 3-4 months before the show. They will lose body fat. They will lose tons of muscles. This is why they will have to jump on high amount of steroids. And some of them will end up in good shape, most of them don't. Some of them win the shows, most of them never win any show. And after the show, the cycle repeats itself. They will start eating again, high amount of carbohydrates, they will start training less, they will start bulking, and the story repeats itself over and over and over again. And this is sad because this is not bodybuilding. I don't know how to call this, but at the same time, this is also not healthy because that sudden increase in body weight, especially in the weight that is related to fat and extra water, is a massive burden for your organs, for your heart, for your liver. So you don't want that. There's so many reasons why you should not be overweight and why you should rather be lean and stay like that year round for the rest of your life. I don't want to go there now because they'll be the subject of a long video, but I'm just saying that this practice should be avoided. So I will tell you my own story. I was one of those who was actually overeating carbohydrates, but I didn't know. I was simply religiously following Mike Mentzer's advice in those days. And I was eating 1 gram of protein per kg. I was 100 kgs, so I had 100 grams of protein a day, 50 grams of fat, and the rest were carbohydrates. So how did I calculate right amount of carbohydrates? So 100 grams of protein is 400 calories. 50 grams of fat are 450 calories. So protein and fat together were 950 calories. Now I needed 2,500 calories in order to maintain, build muscle and burn fat, according to Mike Mentzer. Now that was left 1,550 calories. So that was roughly 400 grams of carbohydrates. So I had 400 grams of carbohydrates a day, every day, 100 grams of protein and 50 grams of fat. And I believed that this is the best way to go. Yes, I was strong, I grew, I was heavy, I actually went up to 110, 12 kgs, but the problem was that that gained weight was mainly fat. So I ended up being fat. And I thought, I actually didn't know what I'm doing wrong because I was doing everything right. Short workouts, all out, 1 set per exercise, everything that he advised. Training every muscle once per week, fine, but super heavy duty training and this diet. And I ended up fat. Then I came across some really good bodybuilders in those days. And they were laughing at me. They said, "How you can't eat that much porridge in the morning and rice again and then pasta and potatoes and this and that." I really loved that diet. I was enjoying it, but I ended up fat. Now, after I met experienced bodybuilders who were lean, big, covered in veins, I finally changed my approach. And this is when I started changing. I dropped carbohydrates down to 100 grams, up protein to 3 grams per kg. Fat was around 50 to 100 grams a day. And everything started changing. I started growing like a weed. Not just that, I started getting leaner. I finally saw my body because I couldn't see it before. So you see, you can take it from me, first-hand experience, what happens when you rely on high carbohydrate diet and what happens when you go to high protein, low carb, medium fat diet. Now, the reasons why your carbohydrate intake should be low is explained in detail in my new book, High Protein, Low Carb Diet. Now, another great benefit of high protein, low carbohydrate diet is obviously satiety. Because when you eat a protein meal, let's say you eat a steak with 3-4 eggs, and after that meal, you will be full. You won't be hungry for hours. You may not need to eat more than 2 or 3 times per day. And I also advise people to eat 2 or 3 times per day anyway. Now, you will feel satiated because protein and fat will give you that fullness. Your body will be very happy. Also, they regulate production of 2 important hormones, which are ghrelin and leptin, hormone of hunger and hormone of satiety. And you will simply, after that meal, you will forget about eating again. I eat 2 or 3 times per day. The time between the meals is 5, 6, 7 hours. I don't even think about food. But what is important, I get my necessary amount of protein and fat every day in 2 or 3 meals. So I would advise rather to eat 2 or 3 solid meals than 6, 7 small meals made of carbohydrates predominantly. So that satiety is massive advantage. Also, when you eat, as I say, 2, 3 big meals made of predominantly protein and fat, your insulin levels will be constant in the body, and the body will have time to adapt between the meals and to regulate hormones perfectly. Now, this is not the case with high carbohydrate diets, which are usually made of 5, 6, 7 meals per day, simply because carbohydrates don't give you satiety. You know how much rice you can eat, or pasta, or pizza, or not to mention donuts. You can eat them in huge amounts. You just can't stop eating it because they don't give you that satiety as protein does. And not just that, after the meal high in carbohydrates, you will have a sudden spike of blood sugar, meaning high levels of insulin will be produced, and they will bring that to the bottom. They will wipe out blood sugar, deliver glucose wherever is needed, glycogen, but most likely glycogen stores are full anyway. They will end up in fat. And what is going to happen? Because of your very low blood sugar, you're going to get hungry again. The body will be forced to produce ghrelin, hunger hormone, and you have to eat again. And the same story will happen again. And this is what happens with people who have to eat 6, 7, 8 times a day. You see them carrying food with them. They're absolutely hysterical about food. Oh, I have to eat every 2, 3 hours because I start shaking because, I don't feel right. I don't have energies. So basically, they become addicts. They develop that carbohydrate addiction. And this is not just insane, but is also not very healthy, is bad for you. Another issue which is related to what I just said is energy stability. So when you eat protein and fat, your energy levels will be constant during the day. I am full of energy from the moment I wake up till I go to bed. My energy levels never drop. I've seen people who simply start shaking and they have to eat. The food, the carbohydrates are literally like drugs. They need the fix. Once they eat, they feel better. Then they train or whatever, and they, again, the same thing. In 2 hours, they quickly have to eat again. And I see them everywhere. They're sitting there in the gym, sitting on at the desk, and just, eating constantly. People are opening chicken and rice. Everybody's eating 2, 3 times. It's like a religion. But long term, this is very bad. Because that carbohydrate addiction will end up with very bad unwanted consequences. Now let us address probably the biggest criticism of everything I have said so far. Whenever someone hears the word low carbohydrates, they almost all jump and say the same thing. But don't you need carbohydrates in order to build muscles? Because carbohydrates are directly related to glycogen, and glycogen is necessary for building muscles. And this is true. Yes, you need glycogen, obviously, because without glycogen, muscles cannot function. But what is not true is that you need exclusively carbohydrates in order to build glycogen. So how can you build glycogen if you don't eat carbohydrates? A lot of people don't know, but they have never heard about something called gluconeogenesis. Now, gluconeogenesis is not magic. It's not a chemical process caused by some medication or injection or something like that. Gluconeogenesis is simply a physiological process of converting protein into glycogen. So why gluconeogenesis exists at all in human physiology? Because this is how we have evolved. Because throughout evolution, humans did not have carbohydrates, especially not in the amounts that they started eating some 7,000 to 10,000 years ago with the discovery of agriculture. Now, how did humans exist for 2, 3, 400,000 years before discovery of agriculture, before discovery of grains, before pasta, rice, pizza, bread, etc.? How did people thrive? How did they look? Were they sick? Were they low in energy? Were they low in glycogen? Were they low in muscle size? No, not at all. They thrived perfectly. How? Because gluconeogenesis allowed them to perfectly fill their glycogen stores without eating carbohydrates. So yes, if you eat low amount of carbohydrates, it will help you up to the point to fill your glycogen stores. But with gluconeogenesis, your glycogen stores will always be replenished as much as needed, never more than that. So if you rely on protein and fat, if your diet is predominantly based on protein and fat, you will always have enough glycogen. Now, some people will say, oh, but if I eat carbohydrates, my glycogen stores will be always full 100%. But you don't need to have glycogen stores full 100% because you will never need all that glycogen for anything relating to bodybuilding and bodybuilding workout, because you will never burn 100% of your glycogen from your muscles during the workout. You will burn certain amount of glycogen, but you will never need 100%. So there is a fine line which is simply regulated via gluconeogenesis. Your body will always have enough glycogen. Not because nature wanted you to be a bodybuilder and to look great, but because glycogen is simply necessary for survival. Just imagine our ancestors who were in need of sprinting, of jumping, or of climbing on sudden explosive movements, running or chasing animals. They couldn't have done that without glycogen. So the moment you lose glycogen because of high intensity workout, the body will first thing is to repair glycogen stores. That doesn't mean that the only way to replace glycogen stores is eating a lot of carbohydrates. You don't even have to eat carbohydrates. In last 3 months, I may have eaten maybe carbohydrates 2-3 times. I had the sweet potato once, I had a bit of rice once, just for fun, because I don't need it. And I train 5 times per week, and I do high volume workouts. As you know, I do between 25 to 30 sets for large muscle groups in every single session. So how am I able to do that if I don't eat carbohydrates? But the point and the difference is that I'm always lean, not just lean. My legs are shredded. I'm all covered in veins. And how's that possible? Well, it is possible because I never eat more than I need. So my glycogen stores may not be 100% full, but they are full enough to allow me to perform up to 30 sets for legs, for back, for chest, sometimes for shoulders, etc. So you see, you don't need 100%. So what happens if you rely on carbohydrates for that reason of filling up your glycogen 100%? You will definitely experience that spillover of glucose from muscle cells because your glycogen stores are always full. Now, when you exercise, you don't lose much glycogen. You don't lose more than 50 grams of glycogen per session. I'm talking large muscle groups. So how much carbs do you really need to replenish that? 300, 400, 500 grams per day? No, you just need 50 grams of carbs. And that will probably relate to anywhere around 60 to 70 grams of protein when it's converted via gluconeogenesis. So you don't even need those 50 grams of carbs to replenish 50 grams of glycogen. So think. So what is going to happen with anything more than 50 grams? This is why I advise my clients never to go over 100 grams of carbs a day. Maybe when they do legs, back, when they do other muscle groups, 50 grams in days off, no carbs at all, because you don't need them. And most of my clients are over 35, 40, I have 50, 60 years old clients, and they are constantly lean. When they experiment with higher intake of carbohydrates, when they try sometimes to go for a few weeks, 150, 200 grams a day, they start getting fat. So you see, the information that I'm giving it to you is first-hand information. And I have explained that in detail in my new book, which is called high protein, low carb diets. So if interested, you can get more information from my book. Now let us move away from physiology for a moment and talk about something that I think is even more important, and this is human behavior. So why most diets fail? There are all kinds of diets that people have tried, but most of the time they all fail. There are different reasons for that. There are diets which are extremely low in calories, and they really worry only about calories, nothing else. So the restriction of calories is the number one issue in some diets. So when that happens, people are forced to cut their calories. Let's say they go 500 calories less every week or 2 weeks until they come to some, 1,000 calories a day, a bit less or a bit more, doesn't matter. But the amount of calories they calculate and they lower down brings them to the point that they start losing weight. But they're not only losing fat, they're also losing muscle, but they don't care about that because the scale shows they lost 10, 20, 30 pounds. And they will never know where these pounds have come from fat, from muscles, from other tissues. They don't know about it. Now this brings them to the point of starvation. When that happens, when the body gets to the point of starvation, the body fights back. And it will use all psychological and physiological ways to get you back. And when that happens, people start overeating and they come back in a week. All the weight that have lost has came back, and even more than that. So this is main reason why most diets fail, especially the ones they rely especially on counting calories and then bringing calories down. This happens to many bodybuilders. They calculate everything, they measure everything. Every food is measured in grams, in milligrams, rice, pasta, chicken, fish. They make results, they get in shape, and then they break. Simply because those diets are not sustainable. They cannot be carried away for months, not to mention years. Another reason why many diets fail is those diets, although low in calorie, are predominantly made of carbohydrates. So carbohydrates will make you constantly hungry. And those diets, I've seen people eating like that, very small portions of food, usually chicken and rice, fish and rice, sandwich with just bread and ham, no fat. So these diets completely eliminate fat. They are made of 70% carbs, 30% protein, and they start eating less and less as they try to get in shape for whatever reason. Some of them compete. They will manage to do that, but then after the show, they come back in 2-3 days and you will never recognize them. They put so much weight in literally in days. I'm talking 2-3 days, not 2-3 weeks. They explode simply because these diets, again, are not sustainable. They are all restrictive. They're very restrictive, and the body cannot cope. So the body will come back, fighting back, and it will always win. Now compare that to the diet that I'm advising, which is high protein, low carbohydrates, medium fat. So this is not just the diet for 3 months. This is the diet for life. So it's about sustainability. It's about diet that you can follow for the rest of your life. That diet will allow you to build muscle, burn fat, stay lean, full of energy. You will never be hungry. You will always be happy to do things. You will be eating 2-3 times per day. So you're not going to be the slave of food. You won't be carrying the bags of food containers and look at your watch turning into a hysterical case because you need to eat in 2 hours. So these things are extremely important. And this is why I wrote a book in which I explain all these tremendous benefits of high protein, low carb diet. Not just for building muscle and burning fat, but staying lean and healthy for the rest of your life. So after everything I said today, what should I actually recommend? So if somebody come and said to me, Dr. Nash, I want to build as much muscle as possible while staying lean and healthy, what should I do? So the number one thing should be prioritize protein. So your diet should be based on protein. You have to understand that protein is absolutely essential, and you first of all you need to see how much protein do you eat. As I write in my latest book, I recommend everywhere from 1.8 to 3 grams of protein per day per kg of body weight, depending on your size, depending on your experience, your fitness level, on your metabolism, your gender, your age. This is why I don't say just you need to eat 2 grams of protein per day. No, I said 1.8 up to 3, depending on different factors. And once you find out how much protein you need, I advise for majority of people, half of that amount in weight to be in fat. So if you, for example, end up eating 300 grams of protein, amount of fat that I would advise will be 150 grams of fat a day. Now that should also be taken as a guidance, and everybody should find that how much fat do you need, because some people may need less fat, some people may need more fat, again depending on metabolism or physical activities. One of the biggest problems that I have encountered with lots of clients who were on carnivore diet is they were eating too much fat. And although on carnivore diet, with zero carbs, they were still carrying a lot of body fat. So, being on low-carb diet or on zero-carb diet is not a green light for eat as much fat as you want. Not at all. Forget about this. Again, stick to protein, calculate how much protein you need for your body weight, and half of that amount for most people should be fat. Now, how much carbs? Well, I think nobody needs more than 50 to 100 grams of carbs per day if you are training 4 or 5 times per week. Some people may prefer to eat 100, some people may prefer to eat 150, maybe very few will stay lean and build muscle on 200 grams of carbs, because it's not easy to stay lean eating 200 grams of carbs a day. Some people will need to be on 50 grams. Some people may experiment with going on zero carbs, but the essential part are protein and fat, simply because they are essential. So what is essential? We have essential amino acids, we have essential fatty acids, but we don't have essential carbohydrates because they are not essential. Body can produce carbohydrates by converting fat and protein into glucose. It's not a problem. And because carbohydrates are not essential, this is why we can thrive on low amount of carbohydrates or on zero carbs as well. This is something very important to understand. When it comes to best protein and fat sources, I would advise food like eggs, meat, liver, chicken, fish, and dairy for people who can tolerate dairy. So this is the best selection of foods which contain protein, very high quality protein, enough fat, enough good quality fat, and if you want to add extra carbohydrates, they can come either from vegetables, or maybe rice, or maybe sweet potato, or potatoes. Again, you have to be very careful with carbohydrates. Also, you should not fear dietary fat, because fat is absolutely necessary for many physiological processes in the body, for many tissues, and also fat is necessary for production of testosterone and other hormones. So you need fat, you need cholesterol in order to thrive, in order to have a healthy body. And again, I speak about that in detail in my new book. So understand carbohydrates simply as fillers. If you have certain amount of carbs, they will help you to rebuild your glycogen. Some people feel better because they eat carbs for different psychological reasons or whatever reasons, cultural, etc. So again, if you are one of those, then just be careful that you don't pass that amount that I recommend, because remember, carbohydrates, pasta, rice, bread, cereals, they don't contain anything essential. They're not essential amino acids, they're not essential fatty acids. So the carbohydrates are simply not essential, so treat them like that. And remember, the diet that we have discussed today is the most sustainable diet that you can follow for the rest of your life. It will grant you not just big muscles, low body fat, but also it will create very favorable metabolic environment that will be within you for the rest of your life, and that will all contribute to good health, and especially something that I find absolutely essential and very, very important, and this is insulin sensitivity. And this is something that most people suffer from it, and insulin resistance is the underlying cause of most chronic diseases. Now, if you want to learn how to apply all these principles in practice, how much protein do you need, how much fat do you need, how to structure your meals, how to lose fat while preserving muscles, how to make this diet sustainable for life, I have put all this together in my new book, High Protein, Low-Carb Diet. And this is not a fad diet. It's not a 30-day challenge. This is not a quick fix. It is a practical nutritional system based on scientific evidence and more than 4 decades of my personal experience and coaching. If you would like to find out more, simply click on the link in the comments and you can download my new book, High Protein, Low Carb Diet. So if you have enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel, like the video, share the video, and also send me your comments. And I will see you in the next video.